Okay, welcome to Puppynapped. This may be 2 videos. I'm not sure how long this is going to take. Anyway, we start out, you should probably read the first few pages of Puppynapped, which is in Canvas. It tells what happened, and then as I scroll down, it shows the ransom note. As I scroll down, that's where you chose jobs, which you already did. Then it goes through how to do each of the tests. So we're going to go over that in a minute. And then after that, it goes over each suspect. So you need to read these. These are what was going on with each suspect the night of the crime. So Mrs. Guston, I'm going to read hers just because it's top. Mrs. Guston is the assistant principal, so has a key to everything in the building. Mrs. Guston has been working on drywalling a new room project after school. Last year, Mrs. Guston helped build an addition to Mrs. McCarty's house. Mrs. Guston and Mrs. McCarty had an argument about the cost of the job. Mrs. Guston claimed that Mrs. McCarty was just trying to get out of paying the bill. On the night of the kidnapping, Mrs. Guston was taking a sourdough bread making class from a world-famous bread maker. The class took place 5 blocks from the school building from 7 to 9. Security guard at the community building confirms that Mrs. Guston's car was in the parking lot after class. Mrs. Guston also had 2 loaves of bread and the vinegar needed to make the bread the night of the puppy napping. Now, when you read these, think about, because one of the things you're going to have to do is identify what the white powder and clear liquid is at the scene. Read this and decide, what white powders and clear liquids might Mrs. Guston have on her. She was in a bread making class. There's all kinds of white powders involved in bread. She had vinegar, but there are other clear liquids involved in making that. Drywalling, there's white powders and clear liquids involved in that. So think about which one she would have. Look at her timeline as opposed to the timeline of the crime, which it talks about on the very first page. Then go on to Mrs. Troxel. There are 6 suspects. You see, Guston, Troxel, Narwhal, Daniil, Wellpot, Eskew, and Potter. Now, the guilty person is one of those 6 people. It is not me. It's one of those 6 people. I'm not one of those 6 people. Now, there are times you might need evidence from me because this is my classroom, for example. There might be some of the evidence that would point to me because it's my classroom. A fiber from my clothes might be in the area. So think about logically some of these things. Okay. So then after that, you'll see where the lab recorder will put all their answers, and we're going to talk about that. So in your tray, you should have a bag of pH papers. You should have a blood tray. You should have a chem tray. You should have tweezers. You should have a couple of these little droppers, a couple scoops. Now, I can't emphasize enough to be clean. When you use these droppers or these droppers, you should not touch the substance you're dropping into with the dropper. What happens is you get it on the dropper and then all of a sudden it's in the liquid and you've contaminated your sample, which means you'll likely get the wrong answer. You'll get the wrong pH, you'll get whatever. So be very clean. If you use this scoop in the sodium hydroxide, make sure that it's cleaned and dried before you put it in the flour. If you use this to stir something, make sure it's clean and dried and clean on the inside too. Suck some clean water into it and clean it out on the inside before you use it again. That's just, you have to do that. You also should have a folder, and in the folder, first of all, are the jobs that you asked for, and it tells you which one you got. Then there is just tells you what each person, what I'm looking for, what you need to turn in each job. Then this one is the summary that the lead investigator fills out near the end. And then on the back of that is the to-do list that the lead investigator, if you have 4 people at your table, fill this out. If you don't have 4 people at your table, this doesn't need to be done. Some people like to do it anyway, but I'm not going to be grading this on a table of 3. Then the lab recorder's pages, there's several pages in a stapled thing where they write down all the results to your tests. The suspect webs are yellow. You're required to have 3 filled out, not just one word on them. You're required to have 3 filled out. So there's three in here, but there's more if you need more. To fill this out, you're going to put the suspect name in the center. Like, let's say it's Mr. Narwhal. And in each bubble, you're going to put how evidence points to Mr. Narwhal. So I would fill one out for the first person you get evidence for. Let's say you find the dirt's Mr. Daniil. So you'd put Daniil in the middle, and you'd put that the dirt matches, and you'd say why it matches. And then the next time you do something, if it doesn't match Mr. Daniil, you can put that on here too. Basically, it's how the evidence relates to the suspect. Then the last thing is the evidence webs. And these are filled out by the evidence handler. You're going to put a piece of evidence in here. So maybe you're going to put the white powder. I would probably, when you identify the white powder, I'd probably put that in there. And then you can go through the bios and figure out how that points to or doesn't point to any of your suspects. And again, there are 3 of them in here because you're required to fill out 3. And that means fill them out, not just put one word on them and turn them in. So fill out 3, and then you can have more if you need more. Okay, so let's get to the tests. Okay, so the first test, if I get there, there's a list here of the tests you can run in your packet that's on Canvas. Fingerprint comparison. Let me start with the dirt and the white powder and clear liquid. So everywhere, the police have collected a sample of dirt everywhere where somebody was that night. This happens to be Wellpot. This is with the dirt from where Wellpot was that night. There was a dirt sample, like a dirty footprint at the scene. So they want to know whose dirt is at the scene. So to do this, you would take your chem plate and your little scoop that's clean, and you'd put a little bit of dirt in your chem plate, and then you might put some distilled water in it. And I want you to note, I don't have a boatload. I just have, if I get it on the screen, a little bit. You don't need to, if you fill the hole, then you're just going to make a mess when everything spills out. I would not use anything more than that. Anyway, I'm going to take my distilled water. I am going, there's no distilled water in there. That's a problem. Anyway, I'll take my distilled water and I'll put it in there. Here's some. I'll show you. Now, and take the distilled water. Oh, I can't get got so many things here on my table. Where is it? And I would take my scoop or my dropper clean, and I would stir in here. I know I can't get you to see it. I'll have to lift it up. Hang on. I'm stirring it, but now look, I've got my scoop dirty, so I'm going to need to clean it before I use it again. Now, I'm going to take my pH paper, and I am going to, just one little piece. I'm not getting all the rest of my pieces out, just because they get wet and they get ruined. I'm going to dip it in there. I'm going to wipe off the dirt. The dirt doesn't need to be on there. And then I'm going to compare the color. And then in my paperwork, I'm going to write down the pH. There's a box for it. A pH for Mr. Wellpot's soil. Then I'm going to throw this in the trash. Then I'm going to take my cup, I'm going to put it under the microscope, and I'm going to look at what fibers and particles and whatnot are in here. I'm going to describe it in words, what's present. I'm going to draw a picture of it. All this is in your packet that your lab recorder or your lead investigator, depending on how many people you have in your group, is going to fill out. Soil samples are the front page. You can see there's a spot. I would put the pH under the name, and then write a written description of what you see in there, and then a drawing of what you see. The pH, and that's Mr. Wellpot's soil. Now, there's also crime scene soil. There's soil that we found on the floor over here. So you'd want to do that with that, so you can compare whose soil has the same pH, has the same particles, and looks the same as the crime scene soil. And remember, this isn't a big town. It could be more than one person having the same soil sample on their feet. So that's the first one, and I'm going to have to go to a different movie.